huge crash. Brilliant stop.
Inside the course, and a big crash in the middle. All three boats in the front, over 90 kilometers an hour.
Oh my days.
There it is.
Go! It's go time in Fremantle.
Emirates GBR open the 2026 season with a spectacular title defense.
Welcome back to SailGP. Today we are here in Perth after an incredible event for the Oracle Perth Sail Grand Prix. We've got some overreactions and some underreactions to give to you. Shall I kick off, Lisa?
Sure, give it to me.
Underreaction is that I think that Emirates Great Britain and Dylan Fletcher are going to win the 2026 season.
Isn't that an overreaction?
You may be right, yeah. I think it's an overreaction.
One event, first event of the season, you're like, they've got it in the bag.
It was like, okay, so they had the day one, average. Day two, they were locked in. It was incredible. And I just, as a Brit, get really excited when I see that after last season. Their team's working even though Ian Jensen's been taken out. What's your opinion on it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously after one event, you can't really assume anything. One thing I'd love to point out as an Australian is that Dylan really put it down to Luke Parkinson, the local boy, the Fremantle kid that grew up sailing here. But in all honesty, I agree with you. The fact that they had a rough day yesterday and really came out today firing is impressive. But I think, that is sort of like their wheelhouse. I am impressed that Stu was able to slot into that team and we didn't see them stumble much at all. One thing that team does really well is they always bounce back from a tough first day. So yesterday, I think I said to you that was a bit of an overreaction, I don't know if Stu's as good as Gooby, but I think today he showed that he's certainly got what it takes. So I'm not calling them season champs now, but what we saw today was incredibly impressive.
Yeah, as you say, the conditions were mostly super tough for the flight controllers, right? And obviously that's not Stu's position. But there was people yesterday that were saying maybe Stu's been a bit overrated. Maybe the loss of Ian Jensen is going to be too much for Emirates Great Britain. Why do you think that was?
I mean, it might not be that Stu's overrated as much as Goobs is incredible. And I think when we, at the back end of last season and we were listening to what Gooby was talking through and how much he was running that boat, that just goes to show how much of a key position the wing trimmer is. Not only are they holding the throttle and the link between the driver and the flight controller, but they're calling the mode. And what I mean by that is they're the one that is saying go faster, push here, hold back. They're sitting up higher, they've got all the numbers, they can feel the power. So they've actually just got such a critical role in the speed, and we know SailGP is all about speed. So that's why I thought that they would struggle. But kind of going back to that flight controller thing, why was today such a hard day for a flight controller? And I mean, it's incredibly bumpy. They're trying to predict where the boat's going to be in the sky when they're moving incredibly quickly, but they're not looking up at what's coming. They're looking at what they can see. So they rely so much on the wing trimmer to provide that information. So that combination, whilst the driver wing trimmer thing is really important, that wing trimmer flight controller, and that's why I liked Goobs and Parko as a pair, because they sailed together forever. So very roundabout answer, but I was trying to answer a lot
I
in
wish
that.
I had my notepad. When I hear you talk, I'm like, I need this information for my next interview. Something that I find really interesting is the season, we often see the macro moments, those big things that happen. But I think what Dylan's so good at is those little things, the micro moments. Today, when he just stole it from Contan and the French team at the line, he's just ruthless so much, which I think is part of what you need. I mean, Slingsby has it too, obviously, and they all do, but you have to be ruthless to win a season, and that's what I think he has in spades.
Yeah, I guess when he came in last season, we were like, oh, so much pressure on Dylan, he's stepping into big shoes. For them, if you told me at the beginning of the last season they were going to win the championship, I would have been quite surprised. Going into this season, will they be in the top three? I think yes. I think calling season champs is a pretty big call, but I agree with you. I think not only is Dylan someone that is such a racer and he's always going to push until that very last moment, no matter the risk in a way. I think the other thing that Dylan does incredibly well is he lives and breathes it, which means that he will study so hard, and you can just see that what he was able to bring out today based on yesterday, and he will not stop. And even with that win, he was like, oh, we still left plenty out there. And I think that just goes to show how good he is because even when you're the best, you're SailGP champion, just won last event, he wants to be better again tomorrow.
And this isn't so controversial, but more just like a point of interest I have. How incredible would have winning last year been for Dylan, and how much confidence will that give him? And then to win the first event here, taking that momentum into Auckland and future events, how important is that? Do you think it has a big impact or not really?
I think it has a big impact, but it's one of those things that's a double-edged sword.
Okay.
And that's because confidence is key. You want to know that you can go out there anyone and smash all your opponents, but you can't get too confident and edge on the side of arrogance that you think you're that good that you're not going to keep working.
Sure.
So I think the British team will be riding a high going into Auckland, but a lot of people want to beat them, and there's a lot of good people out there. So yeah, they're pretty good.
So you think it's an overreaction? That's my statement. Let us know what you guys think in the comments of whether it's an overreaction or underreaction. Over to you for yours.
I might have a bit of an overreaction here, and this is that today, or this weekend, was the most gnarly SailGP event we've seen ever.
I mean, you've got a very different perspective to me because you're out on the water and you're like in it. From the shore, sold out, thousands of people lining the shore on the beaches. When those boats were coming down to that top, the first gate, and they were just like loose, everyone's charging in there. It was a spectacle, like it was hectic to see. And I don't think I've seen anything like that aside from maybe Sassnitz, but what was the difference for you that made it those gnarliest conditions possible?
I think one thing is like we're in the ocean here. Sassnitz was, we were up in the sea, but the wind was coming offshore, super flat water, which gives you an element of control. So sailing, there's so many dimensions to it. Obviously, you've got when the breeze is up, it's like you against the breeze. But when we're here in Frio and you've got the doctor, you've got this chop, you've got these big waves, and you've got this racetrack where the turning point is so close to a rock wall, so much can go wrong. And I think, it just had all the elements that we love about racing. The boat handling of the athletes was incredible, that they could push the boat really fast. It was really close. So there were so many boat-on-boat situations. There were so many calls. I mean, unfortunately, we had collisions, but that was spectacular in its own right. And I guess the other thing was just all the way to the end, people were fighting. Like we saw that. Obviously, Emirates Great Britain took the final, but the Aussies and the French, the very last moment, it was like a photo finish.
Yeah.
So as somebody that loves sailing, these are the conditions that you dream for. And then as a racer, that's what you want to race. You want to race at the top level. So for me, it was just a highlight on the water and edge of your seat until the very end.
I don't think it's an overreaction at all, as I say, from seeing it from the shore. What I would be really interested to know from you is if you took this event out of 2026 and you put it back in season 1, season 2, season 3, say, for example, how far have the athletes come to a level that they can charge out there 80, 90 Ks an hour in these conditions?
Oh, if season 1, we would have had capsizes for sure. We were way more collisions, and the racing would have been way more spread out because the skill level is so diverse. We would have seen people stop and start all the time, big crashes, and so I think the level of the fleet has gone bigger and bigger, and to have people willing to push on that reach to the finish within millimeters of other boats, I just don't think they would have taken that risk before. And I mean, I said it in the commentary today. They're making it look hard, but it's harder than it looks because the way that the British were sailing, I was like, how does that boat look stable in the conditions that we've got out here?
Yeah, and one quote I remember from Nikolai on Rockwall Denmark was, I feel that they had a moment, they had an incident where I think they came off the floor, they crashed in nose first, and then he was just like, guys, we've got to push here because it's going to feel loose for everyone, but as soon as you hesitate, that's when it gets dangerous. And is that something that you just have to have, that confidence just to throw it into maneuvers and just charge in?
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's kind of like if you go slow, you'll trip over yourself.
Okay.
So you kind of like, it's like you're like riding a bike really slow is quite hard, but as you're going faster, it's a little bit easier to maneuver. So I think, that whole, we've got to send it mentality is really important. And that's what some people were saying was today was in a way easier than yesterday because it was windier. They were able to send it through the waves. And if you hold back, that's when you might sort of catch the bow or you might not be flying high enough that you're kind of hitting the speed bumps. But if you're happy to ride it high, you're going to just fly over the wave. So I mean, Nikolai said that, and I can tell you that they had 3 or 4 massive crashes, but they were flying higher than anyone. So.
Okay. So they were doing what he said, just charging in. And also, I mean, Phil Robertson, and Nathan Outridge had some pretty interesting maneuvers out there, just like last-minute moves at the marks.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like that is like a high skill level, like to do a double jibe into a bottom mark, like 2 maneuvers string into a row in those conditions is really tough, but that's what they had to do to sort of get out of the way and then get back on the racetrack. So yeah, it was just cool to see them absolutely send it, throw the boats around the racetrack, and considering they're 50-foot catamarans going 80 kilometers per hour.
Yeah. And very close to the shore as well. Well, I agree with you. I don't think it's an overreaction. I completely agree with that point. I think that's spot on. The conditions were gnarly. And as a spectator and like a true fan, I was just ecstatic, as was everyone else on the shore. Okay, my next one is that I think that DS France, Team France, DS Automobiles, Team France, are going to make the final of this season. I'm thinking long-term on all my points.
I don't think that's an overreaction. I think the French have been so close the last couple of seasons. You know, last season, obviously, they were 5th. They didn't even start last season. They were sidelined because their boat wasn't ready. They didn't have a title sponsor, so they were first on the chopping block. So I think they missed the first 2 events. And then obviously they had a wing collapse or the wing break in Portsmouth. So they've had a few things last season that kind of hurt them. And, you know, then they had that incredible crash in Sassnitz where Conton then bounced back. So I think the French have something to prove. Having a title sponsor takes the pressure off. They've got new management in. They've got a new coach, Philip Presti. He's like the gold class standard of coaching. So I think what they have right now sort of lets them just go out there and sail fast. And the conditions they had here was like the ones that Quanton loves so much. But I think, you know, the season before that, they were 4th as well. So they've been knocking at the door. I think 2026 could be their year. So I agree with you. What has really stood out for you from the French team?
I think something that we get to see that not a lot of people get to see, they're just people on the tech site, is that you get a vibe of the team. You walk past their kind of tent, their area where they keep their boat, and you think, okay, what's the vibe coming off this? Is it quite intense? Is it a bit hostile? Is there people falling out? Or is it really good vibes? And this weekend, the French have just been great vibes. I mean, Contan's a new dad. That might be playing into it as well, something to prove. He's juggling a few things. Maybe being a bit overtired as a new dad is helping him be a bit more relaxed out on the water. But I think the vibe's been really good. They've got that new title sponsor, DS Automobiles, and they're just like seeming really good when they're out there. Every maneuver I saw them do, everything that I saw them do over the whole weekend seemed really well oiled, well practiced. And I think getting out there earlier in the week and having a bit of training time in these conditions, they probably found their fire again.
I mean, I loved their starting. Their starting was incredible. On Saturday, the way that like nobody even tried to do what they were doing because it was just like, and so let them do that so magically. And I think today they also adapted to the conditions and were able to start really well. So, I mean, maybe we're overreacting a little bit because there's about 7 other teams that could probably easily make that top 3. But, you know, as you said, I think so much of this comes down to skill and having the resources, but it's also sailing is one of those sports that I say, like, you've really got to kind of like feel good. There's so much mental side in every sport, but you physically need to be able to do it, but you need to feel free that you can kind of be in tune with nature. Obviously we use telltales on the water to be able to work out where the wind's coming next, but in the end there's so much intuition and just like going with the feeling, and I think feeling good onshore translates to making good decisions on the water. And
if you look at the conditions that you said Contan loves, such as these, combine them with our calendar and what the venues are looking like this year, I think the overwhelming feeling is that we're going to have quite a few windy days, hopefully. We've got Auckland, Sydney, Halifax, those kind of areas. Do you think that's going to help them?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We go to these places and they have conditions that we expect, but we always say that when we rock up at a venue, they say it's never like this. But I mean, here in Frio, it delivered exactly what we were expecting. As you mentioned, Halifax was awesome last year. Bermuda as well is back on the calendar. I think that's a favourite flatwater full send venue as well. So, you know, throughout the whole season, we do have very different venues, and I think that's one thing that the French team have to make sure that they work on, and that is that those like lighter conditions, and make sure that they don't get unstuck in that, because they can't be as, I guess, cowboy on the start. They've got to be a bit more precise, but in general, you know, the next couple of events are all going to be windy, and so it's a nice way for them to start the season. Okay, well, you're up next. So I think this could be an underreaction. Okay. I don't know. I mean, big story of the weekend was New Zealand and Switzerland. And I mean, the umpires are going to agree with me on this one, but that's that the Black Foils should have been able to avoid Switzerland.
No, don't do it to my Pete. Okay. It's such a marginal thing, right? Because I only understand it again as like a fan of sailing. And I think, was there enough time for Pete to take an evasive manoeuvre after Seb and the Swiss team tacked on the starboard or drived on the starboard? So what's your view?
Yeah, so I guess in sailing, you're coming into a gate situation, which they were doing, and you always know if you're coming in on port, which is what the Black Foils were, they were on the left-hand side of the boat, is that you're not going to have right of way going in there. So already you're thinking, okay, we may have to do an evasive maneuver here. We're going to have to keep an eye on that person, that person, that person. And then you've got to get ready for it. So as soon as there's a signal that somebody might be doing a maneuver that could become a problem, you've got to react. And those signals for us watching is somebody gets out of their cockpit to run to the other side. Maybe the board drops. But in that same situation, you're trying to decide what marked around, where you're going to go next on the course, what other boats are coming at you. So, I mean, to be fair to Pete and his team, there's so much going on there, but it's one of those things you've got to be ready for it. The second layer of that is they went for the cross and then they realized it was going to be too late, but then how much are you willing to just go full tools down to get out of the way? And what I mean by that is, you know, the board doesn't hit the lock and you can't turn. So the board's got to drop, it's got to lock in, and then you normally turn the boat. If you've got another F50 coming at you, like, I don't really care what's happening. Spin as quick as you can. And so, you know, it's going to end your race, but it means that you're not going to cut your boat in half. And so that's where, for me, like, I'm not sailing an F50. I can't say exactly how hard it was, but I just think in those situations, you know, it was a racing incident, but you've got to do everything possible in your power to predict when you're not going to be right away boat, and then just do everything possible you can.
For those of you who don't know what Lisa's talking about in terms of the right of way, we've got a really good explainer for it, so you can check that out on the channel as well, which would help explain the scenario. But from my perspective as a backseat driver, which I love to be, is that there's an argument there that the Seb and the Swiss team could have taken a small amount of evasive action and saved their whole race day and given Pete a whole load of penalty points for that. In your opinion, how much should you commit to something like that if there's potential damage to your own boat and to ruin your whole day of racing?
Yeah, obviously we don't want teams doing dangerous things. I think with the Swiss team, it was totally in their right to make that maneuver. There's two rules in sailing. One is Rule 14, which is the port starboard incident that they got penalised for, which is the right-of-way rule. And then the second rule for that is that you've got to give time and opportunity. And so that's where, you know, you've got much smarter people than me that sit in the umpire booth at every event that have deemed that there's enough time and opportunity. And I think, you know, obviously in hindsight, looking at the Swiss team, they needed to do that maneuver because they weren't going to lay into that gate, if my memory serves correct. I might have to watch the footage again. But so, like, they were always going to do that maneuver. They also had other boats coming across to them on starboard. So, I mean, they had to make a split-second decision. And so, you know, I personally think they did what they could do. Maybe they could have turned up harder and started avoiding earlier. But, yeah, I think it's on both of them. But really, I just wanted to see more from the Black Foils. And I agree with you, and I think that's what we saw definitely throughout the weekend is all of the athletes talking about managing risk, getting out of the gates clean, staying away from other boats. Because one thing is that you have to trust your skill level maneuvering crazy situations. Like we saw, as you've already mentioned, Nathan Outridge, Phil Robson's throwing an F50 around like a go-kart. But the other thing is you've got to rely on other boats around you to be able to do the same. And that's where this whole like balance in skill level and balance in sort of like experience on the racetrack, like your fate kind of lives in other people's hands. So how much are you willing to, even though the gap is yours or the right of way is yours, put your boat in that position?
Because we saw almost a repeat exact incident between the Bons Flying Roos and Mubadala Brazil later on, and slingers actually took evasive action and they got the penalty points. So it's just interesting to see the differences in the dynamics. And when it happens, obviously it's a completely different area of the course where they were going into a gate. It was also seeming like every other single boat was next to them as that incident happened, whereas the Mubadala and Bonds Flying Rouge one was just out in the open. So yeah, it's really
we see it really often though at the gates, and it's something for everybody at home to look out for, because they're the moments where people have got to make split-second decisions. Not only are you trying to decide if you want to turn left or right for your own strategy, but you're trying to position yourself into a clean maneuver. So obviously sometimes you're coming into a gate and the teams will say left turn here, but then all of a sudden another boat decides to turn left and they say, oh, actually we want to go right, because you want to get a clean lane. So whilst a lot of people have a plan going into a gate, it's also really reactionary of what other people are doing. So it's one of the funnest parts of the racetrack, especially as a viewer, because everyone gets converged in this one spot. Everyone's going to make a decision, and we've seen several times in the past, 4 boats all coming in and wanting to cross and go different ways, and there's a bit of a pile up and a little bit hectic. So I personally love it. I think it's awesome, but we never want to see a collision like that. I'm so grateful everybody's okay. Yep. And I think it's really hard, and I've got my fingers crossed that the tech team pull off another miracle. We know they do so many of them, but yeah, I mean, we want close action, but that was just a little close for comfort for everyone.
And to finish, I'm going to put you on the spot, right? Has the penalty points to New Zealand ruined their chances of being in that final in 2026?
It's going to hurt, but knowing the Kiwis, I think they're pretty resilient, and if they get knocked down, they'll come back pretty hard. So as long as they don't miss the next event, I think they'll be pushing for that final too by the end of the season.
Okay, well, we will find out next event in Auckland. Thank you so much for tuning in to SailGP today. We'll see you next time.